The apartment smelled like mildew and yesterday's Chinese takeout. Studio 4C in a walk-up building in Flushing, Queens. The kind of place where the radiator clanged all night in winter and the AC unit dripped on the fire escape in summer. 600 square feet of everything I owned now. A futon that doubled as my couch. A hot plate because the stove didn't work. A window that looked out onto a brick wall 3 feet away. 12 years ago, I was Marcus Chen, executive chef of Le Jardin, the only 3 Michelin star restaurant in Hell's Kitchen. Critics called my langoustine with fennel foam transcendent. The New York Times food section had my photo above the fold. I had a James Beard Award on my mantle and a daughter in culinary school who wanted to be just like her old man. Now I was Marcus Chen, ex-convict, dishwasher at the Applebee's on Northern Boulevard. The guy who killed 3 people with contaminated seafood at the most prestigious culinary event of 2013. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Certified mail, the kind that requires a signature. Heavy cream-colored paper with Whitmore and Associates, attorneys at law embossed across the top. I almost didn't open it. Letters like that only brought trouble. Dear Mr. Chen, it began. We regret to inform you of the passing of Mrs. Linda Chen on November 3rd, 2025. As executor of Mrs. Chen's estate, we request your presence at the reading of her will on November 19th at 2 p.m. Please arrive promptly. Your attendance is mandatory per the terms of the will. Linda was dead, my ex-wife, the woman who built a $200 million food empire while I served time in Sing Sing. Pancreatic cancer. I'd heard through the grapevine. Fast and brutal, which seemed appropriate somehow. I hadn't spoken to her in 12 years. Not since the trial. Not since I stood in that courtroom and said, "Yes, Your Honor, I take full responsibility for the food poisoning incident at the Global Culinary Summit. I was the executive chef. I failed in my duty to ensure food safety." Not since I watched my daughter Victoria in the gallery, her face twisted in disgust, as the judge sentenced me to 15 years for involuntary manslaughter. The Applebee's manager let me have the afternoon off. I put on my only suit, bought from a thrift store in Jackson Heights. The pants were a half-inch too short, and the jacket smelled faintly of mothballs. But it was the best I had. I took the 7 train into Manhattan, then walked from Grand Central to Park Avenue, because I couldn't afford a taxi. The law office occupied 3 floors of a glass tower, with views of Central Park. The receptionist looked at me like I'd tracked something unpleasant on my shoes. Her eyes flicked from my Goodwill suit to her computer screen and back again. "Marcus Chen," I said. "I'm here for the will reading. Take the elevator to the 43rd floor. Conference room C." The elevator had mirrors on 3 sides. I caught my reflection and barely recognized myself. At 62, I looked older. Prison does that. Gray stubble on my jaw because I'd forgotten to shave. Hands scarred from years of kitchen burns and, more recently, from industrial dishwashing chemicals. The kind of hands that used to create art on plates, now reduced to scrubbing other people's half-eaten meals. Conference room C had floor-to-ceiling windows. The kind of room where power brokers made deals that changed lives. The conference table was polished mahogany, long enough to seat 20 people. But today, only 3 chairs were occupied. Victoria sat at the far end, her back to the windows. She'd grown into a stunning woman, designer suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. Her hair pulled back in a severe bun, diamond studs in her ears that caught the afternoon light. She was scrolling through her phone, one leg crossed over the other, her Louboutin heel tapping an impatient rhythm against the chair leg. She looked up when I entered. Her face went through 3 expressions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, and finally, cold fury. Jesus Christ, Marcus. She always called me Marcus now. Never Dad, never Father. Just Marcus, like I was a stranger. "Tell me you didn't take the subway here in that Goodwill suit." "Victoria," I nodded, kept my voice neutral. 12 years of practice. "Actually, don't tell me. I don't want to know." She returned to her phone. "William, he's here. Let's get this over with." The lawyer sat at the head of the table. William Whitmore, Esquire. Silver hair, rimless glasses, the kind of man who'd probably never eaten at Applebee's in his life. He had a leather portfolio in front of him and an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. "Thank you both for coming," he said. "I know this is difficult." Linda's passing was sudden, despite her illness. "She had 6 months," Victoria said. "That's not sudden. That's plenty of time to get her affairs in order." Her voice cracked slightly on affairs, and she covered it with a cough. I said nothing. I'd learned in prison that silence was often the best response. Whitmore opened the portfolio. "Let's begin." Linda's estate is substantial. The valuation came in at approximately $183 million. This includes the restaurant group Le Jardin has 7 locations now. As you know, Victoria, the catering company, the line of cookware, and various other investments. Victoria's heel stopped tapping. 183 million. I watched her shoulders relax. This was why she'd come. This was what she'd been waiting for. "The bulk of the estate," Whitmore continued, "goes to Victoria Chen. This includes all restaurant properties, business holdings, investment portfolios, the Manhattan townhouse, and the house in the Hamptons." "Obviously," Victoria said. She almost smiled. "Almost. However," Whitmore looked at me, "there are specific bequests. Marcus Chen receives the original Le Jardin restaurant property on West 47th Street. The room went silent. I could hear the air conditioning humming, someone's phone buzzing on the table, the sound of my own heartbeat. Victoria's heel started tapping again. Faster now. "Excuse me?" "The original location," Whitmore repeated. "The building and land, currently valued at approximately $40 million. "That's not possible." Victoria stood up. "That's my restaurant. I've been running it for 12 years. While he was," she gestured at me, couldn't find the words. "While he was gone, the property was in Linda's name," Whitmore said calmly. "She maintained ownership throughout." "This is insane." Victoria's hands were shaking. "He killed people. 3 people died because of him, because he served contaminated food at the biggest event of the year. And Mom's giving him $40 million worth of property?" I felt something twist in my chest. The old wound, never quite healed. But I kept my face blank. Let her talk. Let her get it out. "Actually," Whitmore said, "there's more." He pulled out a tablet from his portfolio, tapped the screen a few times. "Linda left video messages for both of you. She recorded them 2 weeks before her death. She insisted they be played during the will reading." "I don't want to see it," Victoria said immediately. "It's part of the terms of the will." Whitmore's voice was gentle but firm. "If you refuse to watch, you forfeit your inheritance." Linda was very specific about this. Victoria sat back down, hard. Her heel struck the floor with a sharp crack. Whitmore turned the tablet around. "Hit play." Linda appeared on screen. I hadn't seen her in 12 years, but the cancer had aged her decades. Hollow cheeks, yellow skin, her hair wrapped in a silk scarf, but her eyes were the same. Sharp, calculating, the eyes of a woman who'd built an empire. "Hello, Victoria. Hello, Marcus." Her voice was hoarse. "If you're watching this, I'm dead. Good. I've been carrying this for too long." Victoria leaned forward. I found myself doing the same. "The food poisoning incident at the Global Culinary Summit in 2013, Linda said. "Marcus didn't do it. I did." The words hung in the air like smoke. "What?" Victoria whispered. On screen, Linda coughed. Took a sip of water from a glass just out of frame. "I was the one who sourced the seafood for that event. Marcus wanted to use our regular supplier, Coastal Premium, the one we'd used for 5 years. But they wanted $22,000 for the order. I found a guy in Chinatown who'd do it for $7,000. My hands gripped the armrests of my chair. I couldn't breathe. "Marcus didn't know," Linda continued. "I told him Coastal was handling it. I even showed him fake invoices. The seafood arrived the morning of the event. Marcus was too busy prepping to inspect every box. He trusted me. He trusted that I'd never." She broke off, coughing again. Victoria's face had gone white. No, this isn't." "The oysters were from contaminated waters," Linda said. "The lobster had been sitting in a truck for 2 days without proper refrigeration. I knew it was risky, but I genuinely thought that cooking would kill anything dangerous. I thought we'd be fine. I thought I'd save $15,000 and no one would be the wiser. She paused, looked directly into the camera. 3 people died. Senator Matthews, his wife, their chef of staff. 47 people were hospitalized. And when the health department started investigating, I panicked. Whitmore paused the video. Would you like to take a break? No. Victoria's voice was barely audible. Keep playing. Linda reappeared. I told Marcus what I'd done, the night before the investigators came. He was going to go to the police, turn me in, tell them everything, and I begged him not to. Tears were streaming down Linda's face on screen. Victoria was 23 years old. She'd just been accepted to Top Chef. Her whole career was ahead of her. If I went to prison, if the Chen family name was destroyed, she'd lose everything. The media would crucify her, daughter of the woman who killed Senator Matthews. She'd never work in food again. I remembered that night. Linda sobbing at our kitchen table. Victoria asleep upstairs, dreaming of her future. And me, standing at the window, watching the sun come up, knowing what I had to do. Marcus made me a deal, Linda said. He would take responsibility. He would say he'd sourced the seafood. He was the executive chef legally. He was responsible anyway. The prosecutors would believe him. And in exchange, I would raise Victoria, build the business, make sure she had everything. Victoria made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. He asked me for one thing, Linda continued. Don't let Victoria know. Let her think he did it. Let her be angry at him instead of me. Because if she knew the truth, if she knew her mother was a murderer and her father was in prison protecting her, it would destroy her. The video showed Linda taking another sip of water. Her hands were trembling. I agreed. And then I watched that courtroom as Marcus stood up and said he was guilty. I watched the judge sentence him to 15 years. I watched Victoria in the gallery, looking at her father like he was a monster. Linda looked directly into the camera again. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. And I built my empire on his sacrifice. Every restaurant I opened, every deal I made, every dollar I earned, it was all bought with his freedom, with his reputation, with his daughter's love. She wiped her eyes. Victoria, your father is a better person than I ever was. He taught you everything about cooking. He encouraged your career when I told him you should study business instead. Every good thing in you came from him, not me. The video showed Linda reaching for something off screen. When her hand came back, she was holding a thick manila envelope. William has the proof. Receipts from the Chinatown supplier. Text messages between me and the vendor. Bank records showing the payment. Testimony from the supplier. I tracked him down last year. Paid him to write an affidavit. It's all there. She placed the envelope on the table in front of her. Marcus spent 12 years in prison for my crime. He lost everything. His career, his daughter, his life, and I'm giving him the restaurant because it's the least I can do. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. But it's all I have left to give. Linda looked exhausted now, sick and tired and old. Victoria, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But your father loves you. He always has. Even when you called him a murderer. Even when you refused to visit him in prison. Even when you built your career on the ruins of his. She paused. Use the restaurant to honor his legacy. Not mine. The video ended. The screen went black. The conference room was silent except for the sound of Victoria's breathing. She was staring at the blank screen like it might come back to life and tell her this was all a joke. That's not possible, she finally said. She's lying. Why would she lie now? Whitmore pulled out the manila envelope, started laying documents on the table. These are the receipts Linda mentioned. This is the supplier's affidavit. These are bank records showing a payment of $7,000 to Chen Wei, owner of Victory Seafood in Chinatown. The dates all correspond to 2 days before the Global Culinary Summit. Victoria picked up a receipt. Her hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. No, I would have known. Someone would have. Your mother was very careful, Whitmore said. She covered her tracks. The only reason we have this evidence is because she gathered it herself before her death. She wanted the truth to come out. I hadn't said a word. Couldn't say a word. 12 years of silence. And now, I didn't know how to break it. Victoria turned to me. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. Not yet. You knew. All this time, you knew. Yes. Why? The word came out like a scream. Why would you do that? Why would you go to prison for her? Why would you let me? She broke off, covered her mouth with her hand. I took a breath. You were 23 years old. You were about to compete on national television. Your entire future depended on your reputation. If your mother went to prison, if the Chen name was destroyed, you'd never work in food again. Every restaurant would turn you away. Every opportunity would close. So you sacrificed yourself instead. I was 50 years old. I'd already had my career. You were just starting yours. It was simple math. Simple math? Victoria's voice rose. You spent 12 years in prison. You lost everything. I lost my freedom, I corrected. You would have lost your future. That seemed like a fair trade. Don't you dare. She stood up, knocking her chair backwards. Don't you dare make this sound noble. You left me with her. With a woman who... She gestured at the documents on the table. Who killed 3 people and let you take the fall? Who built a business empire on your sacrifice? Who let me call you a murderer for 12 years? Her voice broke. Finally, the tears came. I told you that you deserved to rot in prison, at your sentencing. Do you remember? I said you were a disgrace to the Chen name. I said I hoped you never got out. I remember. And you just stood there. You didn't defend yourself. You didn't tell me the truth. I couldn't. I promised your mother. Fuck my mother! Victoria slammed her hand on the table. The documents jumped. She was a liar and a coward and a murderer. And you, she looked at me, really looked at me. For the first time in 12 years, you loved me more than you loved yourself. I didn't trust myself to speak. Victoria sank back into her chair, buried her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook with sobs. 12 years of anger and grief and misdirected rage, all coming out at once. Whitmore quietly gathered up the documents. I'll give you 2 some privacy. The restaurant deed is here, Mr. Chen. You're the legal owner as of today. Victoria, your paperwork is here as well. There are some tax implications we'll need to discuss, but that can wait. He left the room. The door clicked shut behind him. I sat there, watching my daughter cry. Wanted to go to her. Wanted to put my hand on her shoulder the way I used to when she was little and had nightmares. But 12 years is a long time. I didn't know if I still had that right. I'm sorry, Victoria finally said. Her voice was muffled against her hands. I'm so sorry. For everything I said. For everything I thought. For not. She looked up. Her mascara had run, leaving black tracks down her cheeks. For not being there. You didn't know, I said gently. I should have known. I should have questioned it. You taught me everything about food safety. You were obsessive about sourcing. Every supplier had to be vetted. Every ingredient had to be perfect. And I just believed you'd suddenly become careless? Believed you'd risk people's lives? Your mother was very convincing. She was a liar. She was your mother. She was a monster. Victoria wiped her eyes, smeared the mascara further. And I spent 12 years building her empire. Every restaurant I opened, I told myself I was honoring the family name. The Chen legacy. But it wasn't our legacy. It was her lie. She stood up, walked to the window, looked out at Central Park, where people were walking dogs and pushing strollers and living normal lives. What do you want? She asked quietly. The restaurant. The property. What are you going to do with it? I'd thought about this on the subway ride over. Thought about it during Linda's video. Thought about it while Victoria cried. I don't know yet. You could sell it. Take the money. Disappear. God knows you've earned it. Maybe. Or, she turned around. Her face was blotchy and red, but something had changed in her eyes. Something softer. Or we could rebuild it. Together. I blinked. What? Le Jardin. The original location. It's just sitting there now, right? Mom turned it into some corporate event space after you went away. Private dinners for hedge fund managers. Tasteless food for people who wouldn't know good cuisine if it bit them. Victoria walked back to the table, sat down across from me. We could turn it back into what it was. A real restaurant. Your restaurant, your recipes, your vision. Victoria, I know what you're going to say. I spent 12 years building a brand, 7 locations, partnerships, investors. And you're right. I did. But it was all built on a lie. And I don't. Her voice cracked. I don't know if I can keep doing that. Knowing what I know now, she reached across the table, hesitated, then put her hand on mine. Her skin was warm. Her fingers were shaking. I want to build something real. With you. Something that matters. Would that be okay? I looked at her hand on mine. Thought about all the years I'd lost. All the dinners I'd missed. All the moments of her life that had passed while I was behind bars. Birthdays. Graduations. Her first restaurant opening. Her first bad review. Her first Michelin star. But she was here now. My daughter was here, crying in a conference room on Park Avenue, asking me for a second chance. Yeah, I said. My voice was rough. That would be okay. 6 months later, on a Tuesday in May, Le Jardin reopened. Not the corporate event space it had become. Not another location in Victoria's chain. The original restaurant. The one I'd built 20 years ago with my own hands and my own recipes and my own dreams. We'd gutted the interior. Torn out the conference tables and the corporate art and the soulless chandelier Linda had installed. Put back the exposed brick, the vintage tile floor, the open kitchen where diners could watch the chefs work, the bar made from reclaimed wood, the Edison bulbs hanging from the ceiling, and most importantly, the menu, my menu, the one I'd created before everything fell apart. Langoustine with fennel foam, braised short ribs with black garlic, pan-seared scallops with corn puree and crispy prosciutto, the dishes that had earned us 3 Michelin stars. Victoria worked alongside me, not as my boss, not as the CEO of a restaurant empire, as my sous chef. The way she'd worked summers during culinary school, before the world fell apart. She'd put her hair up in a bandana and scrubbed stations and prepped mise en place until her hands cramped. We barely talked during those 6 months of renovation. Didn't need to. We communicated the way cooks do, in shorthand and gesture. Behind you. Yes, chef. How's the temperature on that? A language we both knew, one that transcended words. The opening night was fully booked. Critics and food bloggers and industry people who remembered the old Le Jardin. People who wanted to see if Marcus Chen had anything left. If 12 years in prison had dulled his palate or broken his spirit. I stood in the kitchen, watching the tickets come in, felt the old adrenaline kick in, the rush of service, the controlled chaos of a busy night, flames leaping from pans, the sizzle of protein hitting hot metal, orders being called out, plates being assembled with tweezers and precision. Victoria worked the pass, inspected every plate before it went out, wiped the edges, adjusted garnishes, the way I'd taught her when she was 20 years old and thought she knew everything. Around 10 p.m., during a brief lull, she came over to me, handed me a plate. Taste this. It was the langoustine, the signature dish, the one the Times had called transcendent. I took a bite. The fennel was perfect, delicate and sweet. The langoustine was seared just right, crispy on the outside and tender in the middle. The foam was airy and light, dissolving on the tongue. It tasted like the old days, like before everything went wrong. Like coming home. You remembered the fennel seeds, I said. Victoria smiled. A real smile, not the corporate one she'd worn for 12 years. You taught me that detail matters. That's what separates good food from great food. The things people don't consciously notice but feel anyway. She paused. Looked around the kitchen. At the cooks working the line. At the expediter calling orders. At the dishwasher in the back. Someone I'd met at Applebee's. Someone who needed a second chance the way I had. Dad? It was the first time she'd called me Dad since the trial. Yeah? Thank you. For everything. She gestured around the kitchen, at the restaurant, at the life we were rebuilding together. For this. I put my hand on her shoulder, the way I used to when she had nightmares. You don't have to thank me. This is what fathers do. Not all of them, she said quietly. Not even most of them. A ticket came in. 6 top, 3 appetizers, 2 entrees, dessert. We both turned to the board, fell back into the rhythm of service. The dance we both knew by heart. At midnight, after the last customer left, after the kitchen was cleaned and the staff had gone home, Victoria and I sat at the bar. She poured 2 glasses of wine, not expensive wine, not the kind Linda would have chosen to impress investors. Just good wine, honest wine. Mom was sick for 10 years, Victoria said. The cancer started as pancreatic, metastasized to everything else. The doctors said it was one of the most aggressive cases they'd ever seen. I wonder if she swirled the wine in her glass. If carrying that secret made her sick. If guilt can do that to a person. I don't know. She called me. The night before she died, she was barely conscious, high on painkillers. And she said, Victoria's voice broke. She said, "Tell him I'm sorry. Tell Marcus I'm so sorry." I didn't say anything, just sat there, holding my glass, listening. I told her it was too late for sorry, that she'd destroyed your life and there was no apology big enough for that. Victoria wiped her eyes. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe sorry is all we have sometimes. Your mother did a terrible thing, I said, but she also gave you a life, a career, a future. She kept her promise to me. That counts for something. Does it? I think so. Victoria finished her wine, poured another glass. The Times Review comes out tomorrow. Did you see the critic here tonight? Third table from the window. She ordered the tasting menu, and she sent back her compliments. Twice. Victoria laughed. Actually laughed. We're going to be okay, aren't we? The restaurant. Us. Everything. I looked around Le Jardin. At the empty tables waiting for tomorrow's service. At the kitchen we'd rebuilt together. At the bar where we sat, father and daughter, for the first time in 12 years. Yeah, I think we are. The next morning, the Times Review posted 5 stars. The headline read, Marcus Chen's Redemption. Le Jardin returns, better than ever. But the best review came 3 days later. Not in a newspaper, not from a critic. From Victoria, in a column she wrote for her own restaurant group's blog. She titled it, My Father's Recipe for Forgiveness. She told the whole story, the food poisoning, Linda's confession, the 12 years I'd spent in prison, the lie we'd all lived with. And at the end, she wrote, I spent 12 years angry at the wrong person, building an empire on a foundation of lies. My father taught me that in cooking, the foundation matters more than the facade. A beautiful plate means nothing if the food underneath is rotten. He was right about cooking, and he was right about everything else too. The column went viral. Within a week, we were booked solid for 3 months. People wanted to come to the restaurant where Marcus Chen, the chef who'd sacrificed everything for his daughter, cooked again, where a father and daughter were rebuilding something broken. Some nights, during service, I'd catch Victoria watching me. And I'd see in her eyes the same thing I'd seen when she was 8 years old, standing on a stool in our kitchen, learning to make pasta dough. Pride, love, trust. The foundation matters more than the facade. That's what I'd learned. That's what I'd tried to teach her. And finally, after 12 years and $183 million and a lifetime of mistakes, we'd built something real, something that would last.